Hello, Scrufftards. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And we're gonna take a look at the situation in Kursk, where Russia is claiming some further advances towards Ukrainian logistics. And when we're done with that, we're gonna move down to Pokrovsk, where Ukraine has liberated Kotlyne and will more than likely be able to push Russia back a significant way as time progresses. A big victory for Ukraine that promises future successes outside of Pokrovsk. So we're gonna take a look at all of this. So yeah, let's get on with it. So before heading down to Pokrovsk, we're going to take a look at Kursk. Here we have Andrew Perpetua's map, and this looks dramatic, but this is recently spotted, geolocated, destroyed Ukrainian vehicles along this logistical route. So this is not this massive Russian campaign to striking this route specifically. It's just that they've been recently geolocated, discovered. So Andrew has put them on his map. If you take a look, you can see all of these images are from various drones flying around, and then you can see a vehicle on the ground here, like I said, right? Russian drones are flying around, and then you see a vehicle somewhere, and they have now geolocated them along this supply line. And I mean, this is a clear indication just how vulnerable the supply lines into Kursk are. Russia is continuously hunting down Ukrainian logistics. This is just one route, then you have another one up here. And Russia is pushing in from here and also from here at Sverdlikovo. If we take a look at ISW map, we will take a look at some claims made over here by Russia. As you can see here you have the river Lochnia is coming down here through Novenke towards Basivka, and that places Russia right next to this supply line here, very crucially. And also they've a lot of indications, hints that Russia has made it across the river Pesel. Ukraine bombed this compound right here, for instance, and that puts Russia across the river Pesel in a position to potentially continue on towards these supply lines here, unless Ukraine has managed to push Russia back. But let's take a look at that. Here we go. Here you can see how Russia has pushed across, away with you, at the river Pesel, and Ukraine has launched airstrikes into this area, indicating you have a Russian presence. And then you have up here, Russia has made it across Sverdlikovo, and they're trying to push it towards a town here called Liberated. They want these bridges here over the Lochnia River. That puts them in a good position to attempt potentially to push across down here, some wide open fields, again to threaten this supply line. But the interesting part is what we see over here. Russian claims pushing in towards the town of Basivka, and now also Russian claims that they have pushed south from Sverdlikovo into Novenke, following the Lochnia River down this way, clearly heading straight for this extremely vital supply line leading into Sudzha, coming in from Sumy all the way to Sudzha. So these are Russian claims, but they have been somewhat confirmed. If we take a look at Andrew's map again here, we have seen Andrew confirming that Russia is moving down this way with some geolocated Ukrainian strikes against Russian targets in this area. So this is confirmed that Russia is trying to come down this way towards Basivka. Now we have more Russian claims that they're pushing down along the Lochnia River towards Novenke. We're going to have to wait and see if this is true. Usually when ISW makes an update with a Russian advance based on Russian claims, it takes 48 to 72 hours, and then you can have some reliable confirmation that it has happened, or if it doesn't happen, it's probably bullshit. So we'll see what happens in this area, but according to Russian claims, there's a big push by Russia in this area towards Basivka. So yeah, this is worrisome. It really is. If these claims are true, it means Russia is intent on pushing down here and cutting the supply lines. And this road here, it's a paved road, absolutely. But in order to reach it, Ukraine has to, as you can see here, they're coming in along farmland and dirt tracks to reach the paved roads in Russia. And over here, it's just muddy dirt roads and muddy mud paths and what have you coming in from Yunakivka. And this is not a reliable supply line at all coming through Ukraine and these fields here. So if Russia can threaten this main supply line, you're going to have a lot more pressure here, a lot more vehicles moving through this way, and that slows down the logistics, makes it harder to bring in logistics, and this will affect the entire front line. It will reduce Ukraine's combat efficiency here in Kursk. Also, let's see here if we head on over to my map here real quick. Whoop, wrong one. No further indication that Russia has pushed up into Cherkasskaya Konopelka. So it appears as if the entire town is contested, would be my guess, with both sides trying to push in and secure it. So expect heavy fighting here in Cherkasskaya Konopelka now that Russia is trying to push Ukraine back after Ukraine made that bold dash out of Makhnovka into Cherkasskaya Konopelka and Fanasivka 2 weeks ago. Also here you can see how I've highlighted the various supply lines for Ukraine into Kursk. And if Russia is in this compound, you can see they have cut this supply line. And yeah, if they reach Basivka, they're only 3 or 4 kilometers away from this supply line. And I mean, they're moving in. They are closing in on these vital supplies. And it will eventually affect the entire front line in Kursk. And I almost forgot to add, sorry for that, that Russia has secured Pokrovsk and they've pushed into Orlovka. They've raised flags up here. So Ukraine has fallen back from Pokrovsk and Orlovka, and Russia is now in control, applying pressure from the north into Ukraine-held territory here at Kursk. And of course, this is where we can see where Russia has made claims that they're pushing in from Sverdlikovo southward into Novenke, a small village here on right next to the Lochnia River. And Russia also is over here right on the border. So they appear to be pushing in towards Basivka from the north and from the west, like we talked about in the previous video. So we'll see if there's truth to these claims that Russia is trying to come in this way and trying to come down this way. And at Basivka, I mean, you can see they are right on top of this supply line leading into Sucha. So really dangerous. Anyway, so yeah, almost forgot to add this, but here we are now, moving on. But now we're moving down to Pokrovsk, and we have Deep State, and take a look what has happened here at Kotlyne. It's blue. Ukraine has pushed in and forced Russia out of Kotlyne here. And if we move over to the Mayakovsk 73's map, we can see the same. Ukraine has pushed into Kotlyne, liberated the town. And same thing goes here for Andrew Perpetua's map. We even have here Ukrainian flag hoisted, Ukrainian assault, Ukraine pushing into the factory here outside of town, and the town itself is now under Ukrainian control once again. And if we take a look at this map here, away with you, and we'll zoom in here. Pokrovsk. ISW hasn't updated the 3D map here yet, and this is a cool feature that I've only seen on Google Earth before. But if we angle it, you can see here, take a look. They've adopted Google Earth's 3D rendered buildings. Pretty neat. So ISW still has it as Russian, but that's false. All of this here is Ukrainian. Likewise, this southern part, we know Ukraine has launched mechanized assaults along this road straight into town here. So this part here is probably Ukrainian as well, along with the northern part of town, with some pockets of resistance probably here in the factory still. But Kotlyne has been liberated. And the reason is, if we jump on over to my map here, going back down to Pokrovsk, is because Ukraine managed to push into Peshane, and in so doing, really narrowed it down to what Russia could do to support fighting in this location here. We talked about this before, the lake and the dam and the Solona River here. And Russia only had two options, basically. They could only cross here at the dam to get supplies and troops over to the combat area over here. And then they had this small narrow bridge here with a small dirt track going through some marshy territory here on an island. And from here, I mean, as you can see, not many options for Russia to bring supplies and manpower up north. Over here, if they made it across, they could follow this road up to Vovkova, but that made them easy targets for Ukrainian drones, obviously. Or they could move on foot or rely on donkeys, because, you know, that's what a grand, powerful, hyper-modern military utilizes in war, donkeys and mules. They could rely on mules to move along these windbreaks and to try and follow cover north this way, all the way up here to support the combat in Kotlyne and Udachne. Clearly, as Ukraine pushed into Peshane, Russia was reduced to only relying on these two very narrow supply routes, and that made it difficult for Russia to support the fighting. And as Ukraine now pushed in, they ground the Russians down. They reduced their ammunition supplies, their food supplies, and manpower supplies, and eventually Ukraine managed to push in and secured the entirety of Kotlyne, a big victory that began with Peshane, that basically cut Russian supplies into this part of the battlefield, and Ukraine can now slowly begin to grind down the Russians who are stuck up here, that are running out of supplies and resources. Wouldn't surprise me if we will see similar events here outside of Udachne. And what's interesting is that one of the units playing a big part in this is the 155th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. I pointed this out before because I think it's fun to highlight it. The Vatniks, the pro-Russians, ridiculed this brigade some weeks or months ago after they suffered pretty substantial desertions. This is the brigade that was trained in France and was equipped by France. But they have now well and truly rebounded, and they have spearheaded the assault into Kotlyne, and they have now liberated Kotlyne, the 155th Mechanized Brigade, taking the fight to the Russians and kicking the Russians out of Kotlyne in grand fashion. And I suspect that Ukraine will continue this grind and reduce the Russian presence here outside between Kotlyne and Udachne, and then slowly push the Russians back, because these two narrow choke points that Russia relies on to support the combat up here, it's not enough. And it's beginning to show the Russians are running out of ammunition and they are running out of manpower because they can't bring in enough volume to support the fighting here at Kotlyne, Udachne, and Peshane. And well, Pokrovsk is turning out to become a bit of a success story for Ukraine. We can see here that they pushed Russia back at Lysivka and Dashenske, Peshane, Kotlyne. Things are slowly turning around right along the perimeter of Pokrovsk. In January alone, Russia lost some 15,000 troops in the Pokrovsk area, out of which 7,000 were killed in action. Basically, 50% of the casualties were KIA, incredible numbers. And of course, it's because Russia is forcing their troops to push into Ukrainian defensive positions, even if they're wounded and on crutches. They're forced to assault with civilian cars instead of armored vehicles. And the result is, as you might expect. That said, we should not forget that Russia is advancing further south. They have successes down here as well as here to the east, although Ukraine has reclaimed the intersection here and made some pushback elsewhere as well. But Russia is pushing up slowly north of Ocheretine, even if Ukraine is holding line along the main highway here. But the casualty figures that we're seeing for the Russians at Pokrovsk are devastating, far more devastating than what we're seeing up at Kursk. Kursk has been disastrous for Russia as well. 100,000 troops in total has been deployed to Kursk, and Russia has suffered some 40% casualties. But the casualty figures down here are extreme, with basically half of the casualties being killed in action outside of Pokrovsk in 1 month alone. That's just insanity, and it goes to show that if we in the West just keeps supporting, Ukraine, they will grind down the Russian army. They are inflicting insane amounts of casualties on the Russians. And I mean, Russia, they have gone from relying on modern tanks and gunships and what have you, to all of a sudden instead relying on golf carts and motorbikes. Now they're using scooters, and at this point they're conducting assaults on crutches supported by mules. That is not the sign of a effective, modern, and competent military. If we take a look at what the Russians are up to. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are relying on Western artillery, they're relying on Western vehicles, and they have come up with their own tactics concerning drones, and they are taking the fight to the Russians and hurting Russia, which makes the entire Trump situation even more tragic. Ukraine was actually turning things around, and there was great hopes that 2025 could actually break the Russian army. Instead, we have Trump turning his back on Ukraine and giving Russia a chance to get back into the fight in a proper way, unfortunately. But yeah, here at Pokrovsk, especially here at Kotlyne and Peshane, Ukraine is beginning to grind down the Russians at this location. And I think we're going to see Ukraine gradually force the Russians back down to the Solona River. So basically, worrying news from Kursk, or worrying claims up at Kursk. gonna have to wait and see. We're gonna have to wait 48, 72 hours to see if we can get some confirmation that those claims are true, or if it's bullshit. But usually when it concerns Kursk, at least, when ISW makes an update on a Russian claim, 48 hours later, 72 hours later, it usually becomes confirmed that those claims are true. Not always, but usually. So we're going to have to wait and see. And of course, at Pokrovsk, great news. Ukraine, by taking Peshane, has strangled a section of the front line for the Russians, and they can now apply pressure and slowly grind the Russians down and force them back. Hopefully they will be able to push Russia further south towards the Solona River, and that would be a big, massive victory for Ukraine, something they are desperately in need of at the moment. Anyway, so that's going to have to be it. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.